Well, the reason I did the Birkat HaGomel is because I had the privilege of traveling with the March of the Living to Poland, and we also, as an extension, went to Hungary, to Budapest. This was the adult March of the Living. You have the March of the Living of the kids, and there's a very, very healthy group. It's growing again after COVID. It's starting to restore the numbers that have gone in the past, but it doesn't go to Israel yet. That was always a sad aspect of it, that the kids did not go to Israel, and the adult group also didn't have an official trip to Israel, but many of the adult participants went. So it's a parallel trip. We intersect with the kids on key moments, and we saw Adam twice. No problem spotting him. I knew exactly where he was, and Spielberg was there too. So we bumped into the kids because we do the March of the Living together. We were in Krakow together, and it's a weird thing to say, we were in Treblinka together, right? Which already introduces what I want to talk about, which is these contradictions. You know, you send out a picture because, well, you got together and it's wonderful to take a picture. Where's the picture? You're in Treblinka, right? So what do? You don't smile, but you're happy to see each other. Everything is contradiction. We were very proud that 1/3 of the adult bus were people either who were directly part of Beth Torah or were there because of the connection to Beth Torah people. So we were very supportive of this adult march. The adult march, as I said, it parallels in terms of where we go, but at different times. And the purpose of the adult march is to raise money for scholarships for the kids to go. So it was created by the late Leo Martin, a survivor who was very active in the March of the Living, and he developed this adult Friends of the March of the Living program, which obviously we stay in slightly better hotels than the kids stay in, and you might say the food is a little bit better. It's basically a 5-star trip, and there's a contradiction too, right? You come back after a day of touring death camps, and you're in a 5-star hotel with a magnificent dinner and every type of luxury that you could expect. So we will invite those who participated in the march to give their impressions and their reactions to it over the next few weeks. So I just wanted to give an impression I had, which was more exaggerated this year because the whole world is exaggerated. You know, people say, how was the flight? How was the bus? Everything was fine. Smooth as can be. But when you read the news and hear the news, you get sick. You get nauseous because it's going like this. Every few hours it's going like this. And that's the impression I had on this march, that the contradictions are strengthening, right? Which means that we're going to come to a point where things have to be resolved. But the contradictions are expanding rather than shrinking, which is true of the whole world. The whole world is shifting right or left, and you can't find the middle, so you get dizzy back and forth like a pendulum. So a few contradictions. Let's start off with the fact that when you go to these camps, they're incredibly maintained. Unbelievable how they're maintained. In fact, Majdanek was under, again, a strange word, restoration. What do you mean restoration? They were making sure that things that were starting to fall apart, like the shoes. The shoes were deteriorating. There's thousands and thousands of pairs. So they came up with a clever way to preserve them with certain chemicals. The place that has the ashes in Majdanek, issues developed there, and we actually couldn't even we could see the ashes, but we couldn't approach them. We had they were visible, we had a view, but we couldn't approach them because they're restoring it. They're making the pathways more safe for people to walk. They're dealing with drainage so it doesn't get too muddy. This is the Polish government preserving it. So we're very appreciative of that. But here's the contradiction. Not that we observe it. You're not allowed to talk about the corroboration of so many Poles with the Nazis. You have to focus on one thing. The Germans did it. They did it to our Polish citizens, of which 3 million of them happened to be Jews. Well, it wasn't the 3 million happened to be Jews. They didn't do it to Polish people. They did it to Jewish people who happened to live in Poland. But you can't say that anymore in the public schools. You can't talk about that in the newspapers. They are preserving those camps to remind the world what the Germans did to them. and them happen to be a lot of Polish Jews. Now, obviously, on our own trip, we talk about whatever we want to talk about. We're not being listened to. This is not the former Soviet Union. We use these gadgets where the guy talks and we can hear it, right? Because we had 53 people. See, it can't be heard unless you have it. So people wondering, is somebody listening in? Because it's electronics. No. Lo ad kidei kach, it hasn't gotten like that. But that's the contradiction. Suddenly, you can't talk in Poland about the corroboration of the Polish people, which was the most corroboration of any country in all of Europe, right? You have to be very careful about that. Then the next contradiction. There are a lot of Israelis there. Poland and Hungary are filled with Israelis. I'll get to Hungary in a moment. Why are there so many Israelis there? Because they're the two safest countries in the world, for United States included, in Europe, I should say. The two safest countries in Europe for an Israeli to travel is Poland and Hungary. How does that happen, right? How does the world change to the point where if you're Jew and you want to go to Europe, and particularly if you're an Israeli, and if you're an Israeli soldier, you want to go to Poland and Hungary because you're 100% safe. Not only that, you're appreciated and welcomed and celebrated. Anywhere else, you dodge. Anywhere else, they tell you, don't wear this, don't wear that, don't wear anything that identifies as you're a Jew. Poland, Hungary, do what you want. No problem at all. Amazing contradiction. Not England, not France, not Norway, not Belgium. You're not safe as an Israeli in those countries. Especially, as I said, if you're the age that they think you may have served in the army. So let's go. I had the privilege, the after trip, there's always an after trip or a fore trip for the adults, and it's choice. You choose to go or not go. But 35 of the 53 people went to Budapest, and I'd never been to Budapest. So let's talk about the contradictions there. The safest city in all of Europe, and I don't mean for Jews, I mean for human beings and Jews, right? The safest city in all of Europe is Budapest. That's why people love to go there. Not only Jews, but Israelis as well, and tourism. Tourism is huge in Hungary. Israelis flock there in such numbers. How did I learn this? First of all, you're hearing Hebrew everywhere you go. Second of all, we asked our guide to make us a reservation in one of the kosher restaurants. She makes the call. She says, sorry, they're not taking reservations. I said, but I'm looking on the internet, and it says you press here to make a reservation. I just thought you speak Hungarian. It'd be a little bit easier. She says, yes, they do take reservations, but not these 2 weeks. Why? She says there are so many plane loads of Israelis here for two reasons. One is general touring, and second of all, there was some Rabbi who was his yurtzeit, and all the Hasidim came to visit his grave. He said there are so many that they can't take reservations. You just have to stand in line, wait to get in. How long to wait? Oh, a half hour to an hour, which means it's an Israeli kosher restaurant. They really mean an hour and a half where you're not actually going to get in. So we gave up on that idea, went there for lunch. Lunch is much easier to get in. Why are the Israelis there? Again, because it's the safest place to go. They don't have to worry about it. The country in Europe, or the two countries in Europe, that are the friendliest to Israel and to America, who vote with Israel and America in the UN, almost 100%, who are very pro-Israel, pro-American, is Hungary. We have their total and complete support. But here's the contradiction. At the same time, it's a country that is drifting towards fascism. It's shifting far to the right. We were there when it was announced that they canceled the gay pride parade. Right? They'd had it for a number of years. Now it's canceled. And obviously that is a shift to the right. And several businesses got nationalized. Important. It's a strange thing, by the way. In Hungary, they're a little bit behind. Smoking is a very big thing in Hungary. Right? Everywhere you go, there's these special shops for smoking. I don't know what they are, but I saw them. And certain businesses have been nationalized by the government. Again, a shift to the right. So one of the contradictions is, so the guide, who was very, very informative, exceptional woman who didn't know she was Jewish till she was 18. That's true of a lot of Hungarians. They kept it a secret. And then she returned. She returned through Zionism. She went to Israel for a year. Then she studied. Then she became a guide for the Jewish Hungary. So it's shifting to the right. And she said, well, you know, the Jewish community voted 80% against Orban, against the right-wingers. I said, well, he knows that, right? Yeah, he knows that. That's what he expects from Jews. He expects Jews to vote against their best interest. That's what he expects. That's what Jews do. Because they want to protect other groups, even though they know that if the other team won, if the other political party won, it would no longer be a safe place. It would be an anti-Zionist country, and it wouldn't be a safe place for Jews and Israelis. So the contradiction was, in spite of that, they still voted for the other team, which at this point did not win. And their only hope is that maybe they can go back to the center and be a little bit more rational, a little bit more logical. You can be pro-Israel and you can still not be a right-wing fascist country. You know, where are those people? Well, those people, in many cases, sadly, are leaving Hungary. They have a severe shortage of doctors now in Hungary because they fled. They just don't want to be there anymore, and they had the wherewithal to leave, and the rest of Europe is begging for doctors. So they picked up and they moved to Sweden and Germany and Italy and places like that. So that's a critical problem now in Hungary. People are losing their basic rights in Hungary, yet at the same time, they stand strongly against radical Islam, they stand strongly with America, and they stand strongly with Israel. Another contradiction, and that is, we talked about the Israelis traveling, of course, to Hungary and Poland. Well, within Israel itself, this past few weeks were vacation, right? Passover. The beaches were so crowded, they had to close some of them. Not because it was unsafe, they had to close some because they couldn't put any more people there. The Sea of Galilee, you couldn't go there on certain days because every single resort was full, and the Israelis were flocking there to the point they couldn't handle the number of people coming there, right? So they're out in the open, and they're trying to now get back to a normal life. And they so much want to get back to a normal life that what's normalcy? You go out on a vacation and you enjoy, you bring your family. And they're doing it in droves. And you want to know what one of the most popular spots was? A place near the Syrian border that Israelis have not been able to travel to since 1973. Well, now they can travel there. Why? Because everything has changed in that part of the world. Suddenly, it's not a threat to be near that border, and suddenly there's a Syrian government that we're actually talking to. And then you get this contradiction. There's certain places you can't get too close to. Why? Because the Israelis are conducting certain military operations there. What's the purpose of the military operations? They're protecting the Christian and Druze community in Syria. They've made it clear, not the Syrian government. There hasn't been this new Syrian government that's attacking Druze or Christians, but they're not controlling the radicals who are attacking the Druze and the Christians. And the Jewish state is now the protectorate of the Christian population in Syria and the Druze population, willing to actually put military into the battle to protect those communities, warning those radical elements in Syria that if you approach the Christian or Druze community, the Air Force will take you out. We'll literally bomb you. We won't let you near them. So look at this contradiction now. Israelis traveling near the Syrian border because it's now safe, but other parts where the Jewish state is actually taking action to protect Christians and Druze. So then you ask, where's the rest of the world, right? Why are they so concerned, and we understand, about Gazan citizens, but couldn't care less if Druze and Christians are being slaughtered? Nothing, not a word, right? Like, even the questions are, why are we even doing it? Why is Israel doing this? Because nobody else will do it. Nobody else has any interest in protecting the Christians in Syria. Because the Pope had died, we didn't even hear from the church about it. There were literally Christians murdered in the streets. It was a pogrom. How's that for a weird word? A pogrom by Syrian radical elements against Christians. Well, there are no Jews there in Syria, so they can't do a pogrom against us. They go against the Christians. And the Druze, because they are Muslims, but they are Muslims who are seen as pro-Israel, and also Muslims who are seen as moderates who would not want a radical government, because as a minority they need to be protected, and you're always more protected when you have a moderate government. So we have this very strange contradiction now in which we have the Israeli armed forces flying into Syria and launching military operations to protect Druze and Christians. So the world is really a very, very strange place now. And it's all coming eventually, I don't know how long it will take, but it will come to a point where things will have to be resolved, because they're drifting so far in one direction or the other direction that at some point it breaks. You can stretch the rope so far, and then eventually it just tears. And when I'm talking about this as a metaphor, the fabric of society will eventually tear if you keep pulling it in opposite directions without any relaxation for it to come back into the middle. And that's really what I experienced in this trip. The contradictions of Poland and Hungary being the safest place for Jews, but now we can't talk about Polish corroboration with the Nazis, which was extensive. Hungary was an example of what happens when you have corroborators and what happens when you have righteous Gentiles. I was stunned by the number of righteous Gentiles in Budapest. It was astonishing. It was amazing, the stories and the number of them from the church, from the secular world. We all know Wallenberg was from there. The number of Jews they saved. So here's what happened in the Holocaust with Hungary. There were 800,000 Jews and only 200,000 survived. So it was an utter disaster. And the worst part about it happened in the last 9 months of the war. Shouldn't have even happened, right? But what I didn't realize, the 600,000, they were not from Budapest. They were, for the most part, out in the outskirts, where they couldn't be protected, where the Nazis could round them up and ship them straight to Auschwitz and Treblinka. But within Budapest, there was enormous resistance by the Hungarian government itself and by the people who lived there, and they were hiding them and protecting them and resisting the Nazis' attempt to gather them up. And as a result, there are today 100,000 Jews living in Budapest itself. 100, that's bigger than Dade County's Jewish population. 100,000. How many are there in Warsaw? 4,000. And Poland altogether, 5,000? But they had 3.2 million Polish Jews before World War. Why is there only 3,000, 5,000? And a lot of Jews that are hiding. A lot of Jews are hiding, and they're slowly but surely coming out. It's one of the great things the Warsaw Jewish community is doing. And the reason is because the Polish government preventing us from talking about corroboration, that's a lie. They were the most corroborative for the Nazis of any group, and one of the least. Certain parts of Scandinavia, they didn't cooperate at all. Denmark, Sweden, they didn't cooperate. That's true. But in Eastern Europe, the ones that didn't cooperate with the Nazis the most were the people of Budapest. Not all of Hungary, but Budapest. And that's the reason it is one of the largest Jewish communities now in all of Europe, and it is thriving. It's a very secular community, far more secular than any Jewish community we're familiar with in America, but very nationalistic, very Zionist, Jewish culture. Everything is there that you'd expect, with some observances on major holidays. So these contradictions are, your mind just spins, your head spins as you're trying to make sense of it and figure out how it's going to come together. If Hungary keeps on shifting far to the right, how can it eventually actually be safe for Jews? All right? And countries that shift far to the left, it's not safe for Jews or Israelis. So this contradiction that is not just Europe, it's America too, it's everywhere in the world, has been polarized, is going to eventually have to come to some resolution that brings us back to the center and allows people to not feel pulled in opposite directions without a sense of future or without a sense of safety. As I said, we're going to bring forward in the next few weeks those who went through the experience from our congregation to share with you some of their very, very strong reactions to what was a beautifully planned and carried out trip by Mel Mann and Mark Baranek, who work with the Friends of the March of the Living and goes every year. So it's a great way to go if you haven't done it yet. It's comfortable, it's demanding, a lot of walking, but it's a very comfortable and very informative and well-run trip. So I thank Mel and Mark and Lori for letting me go, for that privilege of being able to share that experience with so many Beth Torah congregants, as well as people from all over the country who were friends of Beth Torah or friends of people in Miami who chose to come on this trip and join us on what is not a trip, it's a pilgrimage. It's a pilgrimage into the past in order to understand the dangers that we face in the future.